Blender for Noobs.
Hello, this is Dan Nobles, and welcome to Blender for Noobs, and welcome to part 7 of our character creation series. And part 7, what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be setting up some very basic lighting so we can see how this character looks when we do an actual render. Okay, so to start off with, I'm going to choose Shift Z to go back to solid view, Shift Z, okay, and just set up some basic lighting here. I'm not going to set up sort of like an official lighting setup. I'm going to just set up some lighting so that you can do a quick render and basically see how the character looks and how the eyes turn out when you do a render. So in order to do that, I'm going to go over to the world settings and I'm going to remove, actually let's do Shift Z here so you can kind of see how this is affected. I'm going to remove the lighting on the background of the world. It's going to be very, very dark. And I'm going to choose ambient occlusion so that you will actually start to see your character. And I'm going to leave it at 0.50. That's fine for what we're doing. And if we come in here, you can kind of start to see that the eyes look a lot nicer once you start to mess around with the lighting. Okay. Now, at this point, you can like put a light panel above him. You can actually set up 3-point lighting and do it the right way. That would take a while. I've done a tutorial on that already. So if you're interested in lighting setup, check that out. There's a lot of them out there actually. So, but we also want to do, I'm going to do a Shift A mesh and add a plane. And I just want him to kind of have like, this platform that he, ooh, where did it go? Wow, how big did that go? It's like almost infinite. Okay, well, that's cool. So I got my platform, and while the platform's selected, do a new material, and I'm just going to change it really quick to something, I don't know, a little bit more interesting than the white color that it was. Yeah, too much green, I think. It's going to clash with his eyes and his uniform and all that. So maybe do that and just make it a little darker or something. That looks kind of gross. I don't know. Not very important. Okay, there. That's good. All right, so got a little bit of a background there for him. Now, when you do your lighting, one thing that I always kind of forget or skip or whatever, because when I started doing cycles, I got, very wrapped up in creating plane, you create your plane panels and you make them emission panels and all that. So that was all my lighting. A lot of times what I forget is the actual sun. So do a Shift A, come down here and go to lamp and create a sun. So like I said, get into cycles and start creating emission lamps, and it tends to make you feel you don't really need a sun. But the nice thing about the sun, it very easily gives you these nice shadows. So just a basic setup that I do is I choose 1 on my numpad, to go to the front view, and I R rotate the sun just slightly like that. Go to 3 and R rotate the sun just slightly back like that. It just gives you a nice kind of, well, for me, kind of gives a nice variation of shadow, I guess you could call it. So at least now he has some kind of shadow, and you can see the shadow there. If you want these shadows sharper, go to the sun setting over here on your properties, come down here. Right now it's 10 centimeters, which is pretty small, but if I do 0.005 or something, what that does is it gives it very sharp, well, it's 5 millimeter now. So it's, it just sharpens the shadowing. So I think I'll just leave it, I don't know, 0.5, that's not 0.1. Okay, back to 10 centimeters. Okay, so got some shadow, but it's not, really sharp, damaging shadow. So need to fix his arms so his uniform's not poking through. Let's see, so I can grab one of these paddles and automatically put him in pose mode. So pull this down a little bit, rotate it, maybe move it forward. Grab this paddle and notice that notice the different colors of the left and the right, and that's just so you can kind of keep track of, like, if you're doing a side view, sometimes you don't know which hand it is that you're moving, so it kind of gives you an idea of what it is. So because I've moved his shoulders around and kind of screwed it up, that's one reason his uniform is poking through. The other reason is I haven't done any adjustments at all on this, and I used his tights. So when you use the tights, I mean, they're very close to the skin anyway. So just keep that in mind when you're making your clothes. You can come into Blender, you can grab the clothes, tab into edit mode, and you can start, like, you know, what I usually do is grab a face and come down here, go to proportional editing, choose enable, and if you choose G and move your mouse, you can kind of see, oops, G, and move your mouse wheel, you can see the area that's being affected by the proportional edit. So kind of make it that area that you're working with. Don't make it too big. And then come in and you can actually start kind of pulling that a little bit, or G moving it, grabbing it. And, you know, so if things are poking out in certain places, remember we had a problem in Make Human with the pecs. So you can grab that and you can kind of move that, and that would fix that problem so that your uniform is not, or your clothes are not letting the skin poke out too much. So I have some skin right there, so I may want to grab like this piece and just kind of move it and see how that just like instantly fix that. I still have like some piece over here creating problems. So that's the way you can adjust your clothes. I mean, it's not a big deal. You don't want to go too far with it because you'll start to affect, you know, what it looks like on your character. You just want to be able to fix it if you can. So again, not very hard to fix. Just, you know, takes a little playing around with it. Okay, and tab back into object mode. Okay, so now we have, you know, I don't have any panels, but I did set up some ambient light and I got the sunlight. But now, see how his eyes look? Not bad. I mean, they're visible. They have a little bit of gloss to them, but they could be better, and I'll show you how to make them better. So I'm going to do a Shift A, go to Mesh, and create a plane. And while I have that plane selected, I'm going to choose RX90. Just rotate it 90 degrees around the X. Scale it down with the S key. Let's make it kind of small. Choose 7 to go to top view. And I'm going to G move that panel out here. And I'm just going to rotate it, or rotate about right there. And while I have it selected, I'm going to come over to the properties shelf here. Choose my material. Do a new material. And let's call this lamp underscore eyes, because this particular lamp is for his eyes. And we're going to change this to emission. So click on this, and we're going to make this an emission node. So we can see up here, since we have nodes already selected here, you can see that it is an emission node. And you can change the strength either here or down here. And I'm going to make it a strength of 5. Notice when I did that, what it did to his eyes. It's given his eyes, you know, something to reflect off of. So, or something to reflect in that glassy part of his eyes. So now, when you look at him, kind of looks more like, you know, it's got a more glossy look. It's more watery, like eyes would be. So kind of cool. And this is just the 10 sample preview mode. So you can imagine how this is going to look when you actually do a render. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to do a Control S save just to save this. And where is my camera? I think I deleted it, but let me select all this stuff. See if it's here. Yep, I do still have a camera somewhere. There it is out there. So By the way, this is something that I like to do a lot, is notice how this emission panel is right there and it's in the way. And if you do a render of this whole guy, it's going to show up in your render. Very easy to fix. Just select your panel and go over to your object here and scroll all the way down and look for your cycle settings. Expand that, scroll down, and turn off the ray visibility for the camera. So what that does is it doesn't hurt the emission effect that it's having on his eyes, but it does take it away from the view of the camera, which is excellent. Another thing that I do, and I started doing this very much recently, is say, you got emission panels here and you're working on this guy, you're trying to change something and you're right there. And it's just, a lot of times, oops. Okay. Like, right. Yeah, I can't really do it with this, but actually this needs to be a little bit higher anyway, I think. How do you get in pose mode? Object mode. I'm going to grab this and just bring it kind of higher up. Okay, so say you're in here and you're trying to do something with his face, or you're in edit mode. Anyway, these tend to get in the way is my point. So what I do also, besides hiding them from the camera, is I select this and then I go to that same object window where we changed the ray visibility, come up here to where it shows display, come down here to the maximum draw, change from textured to wire. Okay, then all that does is in your viewport, it just makes it wireframe so it doesn't get in your way so much, okay? You can also do that, say for example, I guess the best way to say this is don't think about that solution just for emission panels. You can think about that solution for other pieces in your model as well. For example, I had like a crew quarter type of room. And so I placed them in the room. The room is completely enclosed. It has a ceiling. So how do I, when I try to manipulate them, I can put a camera on them and I can try to manipulate them that way, but that's not always the best solution. So you can take pieces of your actual model that you've modeled and you can do the same thing. Just display them as wire. And that way they're out of your way so you can see right through them. Just a quick tip there, which tends to work out pretty good. Okay, back to the camera. So I'm going to grab my camera, come down to my view here. I'm going to do a Control-0. What that does is it makes this active view that camera because I have it selected. Okay, right now it's like showing his butt, which I don't want. So I'm going to do G, going to move the camera around, R, rotate, and just G, move him in. Go 3 on the numpad. Move it down to where we can see him. Move it in. Kind of see where this is at here. Kind of rotate the camera a little bit. GGZ. GZZ. And move him in. Move the camera in like this. 7. Camera looks a little large, so scale the camera down. Doesn't do anything to the actual view that the camera's getting, but it does change the size of the object. Okay, so G, move the camera, R, rotate. And note that you can also go over to this window while the camera's selected, and you can R, rotate, and G, move it around as well here, which is kind of nice. It's kind of high right now, so I need to move it down some more. Rotate it up. Something like that, maybe even rotate like this. And notice I got this back plane that I created for whatever reason. It's like a standard plane I have. So I'm just going to rotate that around so it covers the view there. Not a big deal. Okay, so we're almost set up to render. Control S, quick save. I go to my render settings. Just on this particular one, I have 1280 by 720, which is fine to do this. I'm using my graphics card to render with. I'm going to scroll down and I have 300, which is, you know, a good preview type of render. I'm going to go ahead and do 1,000 because this is going to be like a final render for the purposes of this tutorial anyway. Some things that can kind of speed your render up a little bit. If you go under light paths, by default, mine is set 8 and 8. I think by default it's 12 and 0 or something like that. You can actually make this 4 and 0. If the render doesn't look good to you, if it looks like it's missing some things, not quite good enough, you can change it back, but this just kind of speeds up your render a little bit. Come down here. I normally use 128 by 128 here. That seems to work pretty well. You can kind of mess around with that. It actually does make a difference if you change the size of the tiles that is rendering out. But that's my kind of my standard size there. That and 256 by 256 works pretty good. So you can kind of play around with those. Set your output that you want to use. In my case, I'm using PNG. I got it set to alpha, but I don't need alpha for this. There's nothing behind there that I need transparent, so I can set this back to RGB. And I think that is pretty much it for the setup. Okay, so I'm always in the habit of just before I hit that F12 to render, I do a Control-S quick save, because especially when I'm working with a really complex scene and I've been working with it for maybe a couple hours or whatever, because Blender can use memory up, it can crash. It does crash, especially if you're dealing with a lot of characters with with actual Blender hair. It tends to crash on me that way. Normally, I mean, I can work in a complex scene in Blender. It doesn't crash at all. But when I'm working with my characters and they have hair, it tends to crash. I'm just going to let you know. So I'm in the habit of saving. So I'm ready to do a render. I don't need this to be, you know, this rendered view. So Shift Z. And I'm going to hit F12 and do our render. All right, so there is our rendered version of this guy. So it doesn't look too bad. With that quick lighting setup, of course, like I said, you'll want to spend some time and do a correct lighting setup. But this gives you a very quick idea of what your Make Human character looks like once you bring it into Blender, import it into Blender, fix his eyes, and do a render on him. So looks something like that, you know, and you can imagine this character. His name is Crewman Jones. Captain, this is Crewman Jones. I'm done in engineering. I've got my foot stuck in the grating. I don't know what to do. And the captain's like, why are you calling me? I don't understand. Why are you bothering me with this? But that's Crewman Jones, you know, that's the way he rolls. So this is what he looks like. The poor guy doesn't have much hair. So in the next tutorial, we're going to give him some hair. But before I do that, I want to kind of show you, because I didn't really get a good chance to show you, or you may have seen it on your screen, but what the eyes look like if you don't get that, you know, those nice nodes set up in there. Okay, so here is an example of a character I created. This is Kayla North, otherwise known as the Pilot, and she's a character in the graphic novel that I'm working on. So hopefully you can see the difference of the eyes here. This is what I was doing before. In order to make them show up, I was giving them an emission node, and I was throwing light on them. I was trying everything that I could to make them show up correctly or good. But then with the help of those nodes that Punk Duck showed me, this is what I came up with. So just, I mean, it's like, to me, it's like night and day in the render of this character. So that should give you a good comparison shot of what they usually look like and what they can look like. So that does it for this part of the tutorial. In the next part of the tutorial, the character creation series, in part 8, we are going to give our character some hair. And I'm going to show you my standard, easy way to give a character hair. There's a lot of different things you can do with hair, but I'm going to give you a basic setup that if you follow that basic setup and then go from there, you can pretty much create just about any kind of hair that you want. So I will catch you in the next tutorial.